Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Manydown Overview Committee. We'll start with the fire evacuation procedure. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. Fire exit is located at the rear of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. Thank you. Item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence and substitutions. I have got Councillor Harvey replacing Councillor Tomlin. Are there any others? Councillor Leeks.
Councillor Laura James. I was speaking to her, or she sent me an email earlier. I said, see you later, and she said she couldn't make it. So I'll give her an apology.
Do you mean Councillor Laura James, or do you mean Councillor Laura Edwards?
Edwards.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Microphone. Right, urgent matters. Due to the lateness of the reports, which were not published 5 clear days, working days before the meeting, I've agreed to take items 5 and 6 for the reasons specified in those reports. However, I do not consider item 7 to be urgent, and it has been withdrawn from the agenda. A briefing note will be sent to all committee members within 5 days. Is everybody happy with that? Councillor Harvey.
Does that mean that it will be on the next agenda as an item for discussion as the report received, or will it be an updated report on the next agenda?
Chair, we'll do an updated report on the next agenda relating to that particular briefing paper.
So, begging your indulgence, Chair, if we can have any questions that relate to that paper raised at that time, that would be helpful if they can't be raised outside of the meeting.
Certainly, sure we can arrange that. Thank you. Right. Minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of October. Anybody any comments on those? Everybody happy? Could I have a proposer, please? Okay.
I wasn't here, I'll propose it now.
Thank you. Councillor Mahaffey as a proposer, and a seconder, Councillor Gaskell. Thank you. I will sign those immediately after the meeting. Right. Item 5, Manydown North update report. Andrew Reynolds. Sorry, Councillor Isaac.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, Chairman and committee members, I'd like to apologise for the late arrival of the papers. I realise that that's not how it should be. It doesn't give you enough time to consider the reports. These are covering very important matters that have long-term consequences for the future of this council. So I think that the executive director will want to say something at this point about that to make sure, because we can't go on like this. And I know that councillors will recognise that there's a huge amount of pressure on officers at the moment. There's a sort of double challenge that has to be met in first of all getting us to a DC committee date, and also to conclude the agreement with the preferred private sector partner. But anyway, if I may, Chairman, suggest that the executive director responsible might be given an opportunity just to say a few words at this point.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies. Very much this shouldn't happen, and it's my priority as an exec director to make sure it doesn't, particularly to this committee, and particularly as this is the second time we've had complications getting reports to the committee in the timely manner. So for me, reviewing our submission protocols and getting a grip on that is of utmost importance. However, what I would also say, and to reiterate what Councillor Isaac has said, there are two significant challenges facing the Manydown team at the moment. One is the contract commercial side and getting that over the line. It has taken a long time. It has proved more complex, and we mustn't forget we've got our other partner, Hampshire County Council, as well. So that takes further time and further complications in getting these through. And in parallel with that, and wanting to close all of these out as a matter of urgency since I've been on board, we also have the live outline planning submission. And again, the team have been working very hard on what is a significant and complicated matter. It'd be fair to say the team's capacity is stretched, and I appreciate, whilst that's no apology in itself, and it is my role to be looking at that capacity. And indeed, all of this is getting my oversight at the moment. We will absolutely endeavour to make improvements for the next committee.
Thank you, Ian. Andrew. Sorry.
Thank you.
Back
Chairman.
to.
So just to introduce this report, this update, as I said at the last Manydown Review Committee, my priority as portfolio holder is twofold. Firstly, to get us to Development Control Committee so that we can present our case to be granted outline planning permission, and secondly, to complete the contract award with Urban and Civic and Wellcome Trust. And I can assure colleagues here tonight that intense efforts are being made. There is daily updates. We're straining every fibre and every muscle to get these two objectives achieved. And Ian Boll, as the new executive director, is working on this again. It's his top priority, and he's working on it day in, day out, and participating in all the key meetings with our partners on this. So I know at the end of the day, the acid test is, do we actually get to achieve these goals? But I can tell you we are moving everything we possibly can to get there. So just in terms of the detail, in December we submitted our transport assessment update. Councillors will know that a big part of the outstanding issues in relation to the outline planning application that we need to do in order to satisfy the LPA that it's appropriate to present the outline application to DC committee is around highways. And anyway, that further work throughout 2019 on highways produced that further update, and I'm pleased to say that there's been a quick turnaround from Hampshire Highways on that issue, and they responded in writing on January the 16th. And I understand, though Andrew Reynolds, as the project director, will confirm that it should form the basis for going forward in relation to the presenting it to the Development Control Committee. Since that time, since January the 16th, not so long ago, the focus has shifted very much onto the other outstanding major piece, which is the Section 106 agreement, and getting heads of terms agreed with Hampshire County Council, and in particular in relation to highways. And again, Andrew will update you on that. It is literally something that's moving day by day, but my understanding is that we're making some good headway in that response, in that respect rather. So the objective, as we've said, is to get to a development control committee in the spring, and we're targeting, and I say this with caution, a date in March to get to committee, all being well. I think our partners and the officers on the landowning side at Hampshire County Council fully understand the priorities here, because fundamentally this is about being able to deliver homes on Manydown, much needed homes on Manydown, and so they are working well with us in order to achieve an agreement in principle on Section 106 contributions that should properly come as a result of the Manydown development on Phase 1. So at that point, if I may, I'll hand over to Andrew to elaborate further.
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. Good evening, members. So as Councillor Isaac has referred to, the submissions went back in December. The LPA went out to statutory consultation once again, and obviously feedback was then requested from those consultees by around about the 14th of January. One of those was clearly highways, where we've had challenges in the past in terms of our approach. I think the response we received back was very positive, and we received a no objection. The next step was then to settle what the cap was in terms of the council's contribution, or the applicant's contribution to highways that we had set out in our transport assessment, and that's the figure that we have been negotiating with them over the last 2 weeks. We've set a deadline for trying to conclude that by very early next week, that will then ensure that the local planning authority can review, be confident that the application can go forward to a development control committee in March. We have had a very positive dialogue with Hampshire Highways to with regard to that negotiation, to get to a point where we feel that we can now settle a figure, but that will be we're waiting for a final response back from Hampshire Highways over the next 24 hours. So as Councillor Isaac said, it is a day-by-day process that we have a dialogue with colleagues in Hampshire to ensure that we reach the collective position to enable the local planning authority to then proceed, which will be an achievement for the project, as we have not reached this point before, and it's absolutely critical that we now move this to the Development Control Committee. In terms of the overall Section 106, again, there's been detailed work undertaken both with Hampshire and Basingstoke consultees to settle the various elements of the Section 106 at a heads of terms level. That's not the overall document. The process is, in terms of our programme, that work will continue through, probably subject to getting an approval in March, probably sometime through to sort of July to September 2020, when we'll complete the Section 106 in its entirety. So that's the sort of timescale we've got to allow the ongoing completion of the Section 106. Just in terms of the other elements in the report, there are a couple of other factors that are important to just cover off. One is in relation to the ecology application, and the ecology application, which was again approved by the local planning authority late last year. We tendered the works, and I can confirm that we are due to go on site imminently with that works to carry out the work. And finally, the Basingstoke to town centre cycle route. Again, there is an update in the report. This is the work that we're doing with, again, Hampshire Highways to consider the link, the improved link between Manydown or Roman Road through Winkelbury Way to the town centre, in particular looking at the bridge crossing on the A340. That work is due to report again at the end of February, with some preferred options which we will bring back to MOC, and also will be subject to consultation with Winkelbury and through the regeneration programme. So again, that is a piece of work that will be emerging in the spring of this year. I'll pause there, Chairman, and obviously invite any questions.
Yeah, thank you. We've got two public speakers. Mr. Lee, would you like to come forward? You have 2 minutes and you've found the microphone button.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually on an item that's a little bit further down. Firstly, can I thank the officers for meeting with myself and Mark Peters yesterday with regards to the education on the Manydown development. I don't think Mark will mind me saying that we didn't quite come away with the outcome that we wanted, and that would be that, you know, a firm commitment and guarantees that the issues will be solved. I understand the implications and what the next steps are going to be, and I appreciate the team going forward with those. Hopefully the officers and the Cabinet member will support our concerns and convey them strongly to Hampshire County Council and the Education Authority, and stress to them the implications should these issues not be addressed. Just for the benefit of the committee, and hopefully they'll be spoken about later as well, is that these concerns are, number one, that if the Eastern Primary School is delivered at the wrong time, or significant controls aren't put in place to contain the effects of it being built, there is a serious threat to the survival of some of the current schools that are in the immediate area. I urge both councils to work with the schools to address this. The second one is that the area needs to have a commitment from the Education Authority that a secondary school will be built. At the moment, there is just the commitment that land will be delivered, but no commitment that the school will be built. More homes, as per the plan, if it isn't delivered, will not be acceptable. The only way to keep residents of Winklebury, Wootton St Lawrence, Worthing and Rooksdown on side during the development is to listen to their concerns and to act on them. Failure to do so will result in a significant number of people of this town being disenfranchised with this council. Additionally, consideration should be given to the fact that development this size will see a large number of kids needing secondary education. And as a result of that, the town will suffer from a rise in the number of vehicles that are taking children from one side of town to other local schools. It's increasingly pressing, considering that both councils have declared a climate emergency. I think I'm going to leave it with let's deal with tomorrow's problems today, rather than retrofitting a solution when it is too late. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you like to respond straight away?
Yes, thank you. Yes, we officers will inform me of the points that were discussed yesterday, though I'm pretty clear what the general content was, and we will then issue those and write to the appropriate person at Hampshire County Council, and also Chairman, if you would agree, we will invite a representative from the Education Authority, Hampshire County Council, to come to this committee again. If you would like, if you're happy with that, then we will do so.
Thank you for the response. Yep, we certainly will invite Hampshire County Council. Thank you very much. Second public speaker is Sheila Peacock. And as I'm sure you know, you have 2 minutes and the button is in front of you.
Thank you very much. I'm concerning with item 3.8.2 of the Manydown North report. This is the climate emergency. The national government is at present consulting on the future homes standard. The deadline for response is tomorrow. And one of its proposals is to unify the standards of energy efficiency of housing across England, preventing local authorities like you from setting higher standards. And the standards they're proposing are not that good. And I've responded already to myself to this, criticising it, because I want this council to be able to set a much higher standard, as me and my colleagues have said repeatedly at these meetings, for the house building. However, if, despite my objections, the government goes ahead and says we're going to have a uniform low standard of house building, poor insulation, compensated by green energy but poor insulation, then how are you going to mitigate this at Manydown? Well, how can we recover what we're hoping to get of having a model settlement of green housing, shall we say? Voluntary standards to higher, voluntary adherence to higher standards, improved access to carbon neutral energy. And I do encourage you to look at the documentation from the London Energy Transformation Initiative, LETI, which explains very clearly why the government's standard is very poor. Thank you.
Sorry, could you turn the microphone off?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Thank you. Would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Sheila, for raising that point and drawing our attention to it. I suppose that there's two routes here in terms of response. As a council, I think the proper response would be via the planning department, and it may well be that our colleagues in the planning team have responded to this consultation, but I will ask officers to check that point. And then the other aspect of this is we sit here as representatives of the Manydown landowners, and as you know, with Manydown, this is a joint venture that's planned with Urban and Civic, and it's open to us as a council, alongside Hampshire County Council, to agree the standards that should apply to Manydown as it's constructed, and that's once we got to a point where we've signed a contract with Urban and Civic and Welcome Trust, then those are the sorts of discussions that will be at the forefront of the early phase of our joint venture. But which is not to say that there's not already a great deal of dialogue that's gone on and written into the contract with Urban and Civic in relation to these issues. But whether it goes into this sort of level of detail, I doubt. But it's an important issue, particularly given, as you say, both councils have declared a climate emergency.
Thank you, John. Councillor Tilbury. You have 4 minutes, and I'm sure you know where the button is.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes. Yes, as some of you are aware, I did suggest we spend our time at the last extraordinary meeting doing something a bit more useful and talk about Manydown at full council, because the delays are becoming quite alarming. I mean, since we sort of started this project in 2012 in earnest, you know, because going back to while I was cleaning our office out, I came across the old Manydown development framework from 2004. Which doesn't look a lot different to what we're doing now, actually, so we could have been a lot further forward. But it's now actually taken longer than the whole of virtually the First World War and Second World War combined, and we don't seem to be anywhere close yet. We still don't have an outline plan application in place. I mean, one of the things I suggested, whether the project team is big enough, strong enough, has enough people, has enough resources to do this job. I don't see us getting much out from Hampshire. In fact, I don't think Hampshire even have anything like a Manydown committee, from what I can see of it. I mean, their input into this has always been quite poor, really. In fact, they seem to be doing very little to help us and a lot to hinder us. I mean, our concern in the rural areas, the fact that Manydown isn't being delivered is impacting on us, particularly now we don't have a 5-year land supply. We're getting this all the time, you know, all the villages, Bramley, Overton, Kingsclear, Whitchurch. We got developers flooding all over us now saying, oh, you've got loads of land, the infrastructure's already there, it's easier to build than it is to build on somewhere where there are no roads, you know, even though we know the problems of building on Manydown. And of course, you know, the other obvious thing is it comes back Fort Hill School, you know, Ruth's favourite. You know, I mean, they knocked down a perfectly good school, one of the newest schools in Basingstoke, and sending the kids to Cranbourne, which is actually older and a rather crummy building. You know, it's like one of the old Scholar buildings they built in the 60s, made of glass and asbestos. You know, I mean, that's progress, isn't it? And no, we're looking at it now. That's going to be a long-term solution, because I don't see there's any way we're going to see a new school on Manydown within 10 years, because it's not going to be viable until there are at least 3,000 or 4,000 houses on there. Realistically, are there? That's the problem. It's, you know, it was just crazy to knock it down. And I mean, again, Hampshire are not doing us any favours with any of this. It would have been even if they had the money then to build a decent school, a new school, you could have at least kept the old one there. And we've seen this in Overton as well, where they've done the same there, saying, oh, we're going to expand the school with all the new development. Now they're saying, nah, we probably won't bother, you know, we'll just cram a few more kids in there and send the other ones to Whitchurch. That's Hampshire's approach to this. There's plenty of capacity in other schools, so we'll just send them around, bus them around all over the place, you know, from one village to another or one part of the town to another. I mean, that's just hopeless, really, and we're going backwards. I'm pleased to hear it may be going to DC in March, but we were told it was going to go to DC back in September. So again, it's yet another delay. This just seems to be going on. And you know, and the other thing I was going to suggest is the Manydown Overview Committee was strengthened and possibly increased to a full-size committee. And the response to that was to actually reduce it from 9 to 8, I think. Now it's actually gone down in size. So, I mean, we're getting some very mixed messages here about just how urgent this is. So thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. You like to respond?
Councillor Tilby, you covered a lot of ground in those 4 minutes. I'll do my best to respond. Yeah, I agree. It's taken too long, and we do need to look at the process and the resourcing on this. We've got to benefit from the lessons of it. We're not underestimating some of the issues and challenges that the officer team have had to deal with. You know, we're not a unitary authority, but I think looking forward, one of the reasons for and the benefits of bringing in Urban and Civic as an experienced master developers is that they will provide the resources that once we have signed a contract with them and have outline planning permission, that will reinforce the resources that we've got, and it will be quite appropriate for us to expect that they live up to the offer that they've made, and to lead on this very important and attractive new development in our borough. What else do we have here? On the 5-year housing land supply, yes, I think many councillors are representing wards where the absence of a 5-year housing land supply is causing difficulties. But I don't think you can attribute all of the problems in relation to the 5-year housing land supply to Manydown. Obviously, it has a significant part to play in that, but it's also the way that the rules of the game have been set by government. You know, there's no escaping from that point. I'm not proposing to rehearse all the histories and the reasons for the decision on Fort Hill, other than to say I hope that out of it will come some very positive new development for people in Winklebury. And in relation to the timing of a new school, I think who builds schools and who runs them is much is not as it used to be under the old system, and so let's just see what develops in relation to that. But I do understand the point that you're making in that regard.
Thank you, John. Right, questions to officers.
It's more of a comment to public comments.
Okay, we'll start with questions to officers. So, Councillor Mahaffey.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very simple one, and I think Councillor Tilbury touched on it. I as the committee's aware, I'm a new councillor, but I have sat on this committee for 8-9 months now, and during that time we have a partner, Hampshire County Council, that I don't know anybody down there. As Councillor Tilbury referred to, presumably there is a group of people down there that are working on this. I think it would be helpful if we were to meet them at some time. Councillor Tilbury suggested extending an invitation to this committee. I don't know. Can we as councillors have more exposure to them? Can we meet them? Can we understand what's going through their heads?
Can I take that, Chair? So I think, first of all, I'm looking at Andrew, who is jointly funded by Basingstoke and Hampshire County Council. Indeed, the whole Manydown project team is, and there's a mixture of resources that come in from Basingstoke and from Hampshire to form that team. So when we refer to the Manydown team, there are Hampshire colleagues within that already. I think what we need to recognise in two parts is what is part of the Manydown team leading on moving the project forward versus what are the resources that sit on the regulatory side making the decisions, be it highways, education, or indeed our own planning colleagues who sit outside of the Manydown team. So there are two parts to that. But since my involvement over the last 4 months since joining Basingstoke and Dean, I'd like to give you some assurance that there has been an awful lot of Hampshire colleagues involved in the project, both directly within the Manydown team, through attendance at the board meetings that I have oversight and attend regularly. I have regular dialogue with my counterpart at County Council as well, and between us and other colleagues, we very much do have that oversight on what the capacity is within the team to make sure that we are moving this forwards, and I think we very much are at the moment.
Yeah, thanks for that. I no doubt there's a lot of people involved from Hampshire. It's just a question of we're supposed to be an oversight committee here. Now I'm wondering, is there an oversight committee at Hampshire? If there is such a thing, should we be overseeing together? Maybe I'm missing the point. I don't know.
So something I can take away and raise with colleagues. I have no doubt the County Council does have an oversight and scrutiny process. Whether Manydown features on that at a particular frequency, I'm less cited. Okay. But I will take that away.
Yeah, I just wanted to endorse what Ian's just said. I've been very impressed with the level of commitment and work that's been put into this, particularly over the last 6 to 9 months by the senior officer at Hampshire County Council responsible for the Manydown project.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chair. I think, first of all, I should declare a non-pecuniary interest that I'm a Hampshire County Councillor, and I don't sit on any kind of overview and scrutiny committee relating to Manydown in Hampshire County Council, mostly because there isn't one. But it does obviously get covered by committees. I think, to be honest, my experience at Hampshire County Council is the less councillors are involved in the process and the more we are, it's probably a good thing, having met most Hampshire County councillors. I wanted to go back to 3.6 on the agenda in terms of questions. I've got another section, but I'll do 3.6 first. This is the Manydown to Basingstoke Town Centre cycle route. You mentioned it's coming back with this sort of appraisal study that's currently happening. I was a bit concerned about it because I cycled the route regularly as a teenager, and there is a footpath that runs along the south of Winklebury, which, if you look at from the air, is a very straight footpath. If you've ever cycled it, it's not quite so much fun, because geographically it's straight, topography-wise it is not straight at all, because there's all these underpasses, which means you go down and dip and up a dip, etc. When you get to the end of that footpath, heading towards the town centre, you cycle across the footbridge, and then you go into Hound Mills, and you go down by where the horses are at the moment, or were, and then you can kind of join up. when you look at this, it says there's some improvements to the pedestrian bridge crossing the A340, which I guess is that one. And then when you look at the map on page 23 of the report, suddenly it doesn't get a mention at all, but just south of it is a pedestrian/cycle crossing south of the railway line. So I wanted to understand, are we moving the bridge? Because I'm guessing the railway line is quite tricky to move, causes a lot of problems. So are we moving the bridge, or are we building a new bridge? Because it strikes me that the best cycle route will be, you enter Winkleberry, you go in the first underpass into the leisure park, then you cycle through the leisure park. Unfortunately, I'm not entirely sure what's happening to the leisure park. I've got a feeling no one out in the room is. So we could end up creating something that can't actually be got through, because you'll have to cycle through an ice rink, hopefully, maybe even a football stadium. So I'm trying to understand, is there any sort of connectivity in terms of, have we looked at the leisure park? Are we creating a route that won't be there? Or are we creating a route that's not really a very good cycle route because of the way it works? How much sort of thought has been put into both, and how we build something that's going to last more than, well, I mean, the leisure park's clearly going to happen probably by about 2050. So, whatever we build now could be gone.
I'll respond, Councillor Isaac. So, I think going back to the very beginning of your conversation there, and the route that you used is the route that we are examining in more detail. We acknowledged that there are some challenges in terms of the topography, where they go to the underpasses, the old underpasses. Yeah. Yes, and that's one of the issues that is being looked at, and whether or not there is any additional grading that can be done to where we enter and exit those particular underpasses, or is there an alternative route that reduces that? So in terms of this particular study, and this study is not a Manydown outline application study, it is a separate piece of work that we as a project have commissioned with Hampshire in order to advance that link sooner rather than later. So there could be different alternative options that use Winkleberry Way and avoid some of the current topography challenges, and that's what the report will come back to us with. So without preempting what the result's going to be at the moment, we will bring back a report to the next meeting that outlines the different options and how we could mitigate or reduce that impact around the gradients and the topography.
On that one, obviously, if you follow Winkleberry Way, you end up coming out by the perfectly good footbridge, cycle bridge, and car bridge that will exist that takes Winkleberry into Howe Mills, just sort of behind the Aldi. But then you're too far up. It seems to me there's an opportunity to link what is Sinclair Drive, then becomes the allotments. There's a very wide sort of cycle path there, to then go straight into the leisure park, which brings the connectivity of the leisure park to the town centre, something else that we want to achieve in a different committee somewhere else eventually. And are we missing it in terms of we're not thinking about the bigger picture of where does a leisure park fit into all of this?
I mean, the leisure park is something that we are aware of. I think the challenge is at the moment the early status of the work around the leisure park. I think the other aspect of work is in terms of improving generally the cycleways is an emerging priority, and I think the comments that have been made this evening and at previous committees around the climate change agenda, we need to improve the cycleways that link Manydown to the town centre. So that shouldn't preclude in the future looking at how you would put a link still through the leisure park. But in terms of the leisure park timeline, that is still probably unknown in its detail, whereas for Manydown there is more certainty around that, and we would like to progress that quicker.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hart. Oh, sorry, John.
Just going to respond. Thank you, Councillor James. You raised an interesting point there, and I think I would ask Ian if we could take that away and see how it might fit into the development of the leisure park in due course.
If I could just add to that, Chair. So yes, both the leisure park and Manydown do fall within my directorate, and coordinating those two projects is a key priority. It's also worth noting that we are working closely with Hampshire County Council on the wider transport strategy and town centre improvements, including mass rapid transit, including walking and cycling infrastructure. They're due to be taking a decision shortly on moving forward the next steps for infrastructure being implemented within the next 5 years, and that's mindful of developments and also mindful of general improvements required within the town as well. So some of that coordination sits with us, some of that coordination sits with them, but we are working to be as best coordinated as we can.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just say, appreciating the amount of work, the amount of effort that's gone into this, and just thank the officer team. It's no easy feat, it's no easy task, and the pressures on you are huge, and I get it. It doesn't change, obviously, in terms of the papers and what's been said tonight. It doesn't change anything in terms of whether there's enough capacity or not. We can have all that conversation going, but I don't want to go away from the fact of just how much work you as officers have put into this, and thank you for that. In terms of just 3 questions, picking up the points raised by our public speaker in terms of funding and whether or not the environmental issues and particularly housing standards are relevant. Is any of the HIF funding or Homes England funding linked to particular government standards, or is that funding separate from that? Were they to set down particular requirements that we could not then, as it were, go away from? So if the lower standard is set by the government and we want a higher standard, because we've got access to HIF funding and because we might have access to early funding for development of 5 million of it for the early phases, are we then trapped accepting what would then be the government standards in order to get that money? Or can we say thank you for the money, but actually we're going to have a higher standard by what we as ourselves choose to do in terms of our climate change emergency? We may take a different view. The second question is around capacity and budget in particular. And conscious of what's been through audit recently, where it was identified that the team would be going out to the market to find the resources for Manydown, and that this council will be no longer putting up front the capital funding for it. However, the administrative and legal and professional fees would still be coming out of the loan that would be coming from this authority, the best part of 5 million. Bearing all that in mind, and that's obviously related to Urban and Civic as much as it is to the council in terms of how they're doing their business and going about their business, does the new budget contain increases commensurate with our concerns about capacity? Are you going to address that on February the 27th in terms of the budget, or is that something you would be looking to take away and come back with at a different point? When would we see those issues addressed, if indeed capacity issues are identified, to help the team continue the good work they're doing? And finally, in regard to the primary school, if the primary school, the Eastern Primary School, is given the green light, if it does come forward in the way that's been described early on, it's likely to be built, it was likely to be an academy, it will likely be beyond the control of the county council. If it is beyond the control of the county council, how are we going to stop it competing with Winkleberry Infants or Castle Hill, and as it were, putting them out of business? How are we going to deal with that arrangement of education in a way that doesn't create a problem for Winkleberry? Because I think if we create that problem and we don't acknowledge it now, then I think that would be disgraceful. It really would be. I just think we need to address that. How can we deal with those particular government policy issues without really hurting a community that exists now and 2 schools that are really, really good for those communities?
I think, Chair, I could probably have a go at all 3 of those. I'll do my best. I think, first of all, with regards to standards are a minimum. They're not a maximum. And I think, that's a key point there. We will be striving for higher than the minimum standard with regards to all of the good points raised around energy, insulation, performance, etc., etc. And we did cover some of that earlier on as well, but I would just stress again that it's a minimum, and it will be a minimum standard linked to any conditional funding. In my expectation, it won't be a maximum. Moving on to the second point. Check my right glasses. Hang on. Does the budget include for additional resources for Manydown capacity? So looking to the year ahead, where we are anticipating being in a different place with Urban and Civic Partner signed up, they add considerable additional capacity. So there isn't anything built explicitly into the revenue budget going forward for approval, because it doesn't need to be. It's outside of that. It's within the mechanism of the company operating and providing resources into it, and how we then have the additional capacity of Urban and Civic sitting alongside us. And I will just look across to Andrew just to confirm that there isn't anything else outside of that. I don't believe there is.
There isn't anything directly outside that. I think we have looked at the resource and the capacity required to cover us over the next 2 years, bearing in mind other project work coming through Manydown. I think our challenge being is a pinch point at this point in time with both the key projects coming together at the same time, at the same intensity, which is always more challenging to manage. Once we move through this point, that will release some capacity within the team, and therefore it is a pinch point at this point in time. But we have looked at the longer term, sort of 2 to 3 year budget provision ahead in terms of and our resource requirements to carry on delivering what we need to deliver.
So picking up point, thank you, Andrew. Picking up point 3, I think, again, referring back to inviting education colleagues to have the conversation with this committee would be useful. Hampshire County Council do have the statutory duty to provide school places. And so I think what we need to just remember here, of course they are rather more pared back to the bone with regards to budget constraints than we are. So they can't really, one supposes, afford the risk of a school or schools failing, because then when Manydown does fill up, then this is a timing issue, this is a programming issue. When Manydown schools do then fill up and other schools also are back at full capacity, should any of them in that interim period struggle to the point, as you say, that they may not exist, then Hampshire would have a very significant risk and a very significant funding problem as well. So they have a duty to provide those school places. They have a duty to provide a school organisational plan or similar mechanism that plans out and profiles where they need to expand capacity temporarily and permanently. And I think by working with them closely and through the project, we can help tighten up those timings such that we aren't creating a problem that doesn't need to be created.
If I could just pick up on just a couple of points, I think, in answer to Councillor Harvey's third question and the meeting that we had yesterday, and I think that was really helpful. I think there was an opportunity just to listen to the concerns that were being expressed. I think we understood and took those points away because they were clearly real concerns to those local communities, in particular Winklebury. I think there is a way of managing certainly the primary school and the interface with when the trigger for that would come forward on Manydown versus the work that's going on the Winklebury regeneration. But I said we would take that away, we would look at it, and then we will come back with an update. But I think it's fair to say that conversation was welcome, and it provides an insight into the issues that are going on and the concerns and the risks. And as part of the Manydown principles, we've always accepted that we must work alongside local communities and not disadvantage them as a result of the Manydown project coming forward and disrupting those neighbourhoods. So we've taken that away, and we will work with that.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions. One of them is relating to number 3, the education, and going back to Councillor James's point about the cycle route as well. So the first one with regards to education, sorry, I know you've covered that loads, but it was literally to say that you're taking into consideration that all of these children are going to go to Cranbourne School. As Councillor Tilbury said, Cranbourne is in a state of, not very good repair at the moment. What is being done to ensure that the children from Winklebury are going to go there, but also what happens when the funding finishes for the buses, because at the moment there's funding going on for the buses. There's a lot of families in Winklebury that can't afford to send their children there to pay for a bus, so they are going to be using this cycle route that you're going to be putting in place if they do go there. So my second point of it is that you've chosen the most unlit routes that you could possibly choose for cycle routes. So, you've got children that are going to be going to school at 7 o'clock, say, 10 past 7 in the morning to get to Cranbourne, and the route is really, really unlit. I don't know if you've ever walked that route, but if you go down by the horses and over that bridge, there's no street lighting. You know, so these children again are going to be they've already, you know, we discussed before that the walking route was diabolical for them to get to school, but then to put them on a cycle route that's as it currently stands is really, really badly lit. And also if they go through to the leisure park, there's not much better lighting there. So I think they're points that need to be considered, and I think education as a matter of urgency need to talk to us, because I think the people of Winklebury are getting really concerned with regards to the education of their children going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cooper. I think what you're saying is you're raising your concerns about educational implications of in the future of Manydown and what's built there in terms of schooling. I don't think it's for this committee to be sort of discussing or the role of the role that Cranbourne School has in relation to Winklebury, but that's for the chair to decide. I think the concerns you raise about lighting on in the cycleway is I understand that, and perhaps I could ask the project director just to speak to that.
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. Yes, Councillor Cooper, we have acknowledged that the lighting there is poor or non-existent, and that's part of the reason why in evaluating that particular route, lighting is one of the key considerations. So it's not just about the lighting, it's about the surface treatment, the widths, the current screenings that are there, the shrubbery that is all obviously fairly unmanaged in that location. So I think, you know, it is not just looking at the existing route and walkway. Is there a better route adjacent to the current Winklebury Way that then links through the back of the football club back down to the bridge? So there's several options that are being examined by the consultants. It's not just the single route as to what would be the most appropriate or optimal route that will go through, that can be lit, can have better surface treatment and accessibility, not just for pedestrians and cyclists, but for people using disabled scooters. So it is looking in the round at that particular route. So I can give you that assurance that is all part of the brief, and the importance to bring it or upgrade that significantly to what it is at this point in time.
Thank you for that. I think the issue with Manydown and children, school children there is one thing. I think the existing situation with children going from Winklebury to school is something that needs to be brought up in front of another committee as well, because it sounds to me like that's something that needs doing anyway, irrespective of what's going on with Manydown. So I think you need to talk to somebody else on that one. I think I've got Councillor Mahaffey next.
Thank you, Chair. I just first of all wanted to echo Councillor Harvey's comments earlier about well done to the group that are working on this. It is a huge project, and with huge projects comes huge challenges. It is recognised, so well done on that one. A couple of things I'd like to say. First of all is more of a desire. I don't expect an answer to it. Just in terms of some of the semantics, some of the wordings we use here, draw the committee's attention to section 3.8.3, which is saying establishing work streams which could include establishing a Manydown standard which evolves over time to enable Manydown to become carbon neutral. Just picking up on the the speaker earlier, I would like to see us establishing this as a fundamental principle, because if we work to something over time, it kind of then becomes retrofit, and it is very difficult. I'd like to, in our wording, to be able to say, you know, it is going to be. But as I say, I don't expect an answer to that one. It's just a desire that I have. But the question I do have that I would like a response to, if possible, is on page 37. We refer to the traveller pitches. We have a very immediate challenge in the borough insofar as we don't have enough traveller pitches at the moment. That's causing both the travelling community and the settled community problems, and I'm wondering whether or not, when you consider that a traveller pitch doesn't actually require a huge amount in terms of building, is that something we could sort of deliver as a quick win, an early win? Can we get the traveller pitches in at the beginning, bearing in mind developers, don't really like developing near to traveller sites, because again, I would hate us to go down the road of developing all the housing, developing all the infrastructure, and then trying to wedge in a couple of traveller sites at the end, only to find that we have the problems that we have with developers and travellers sites at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor. On the point about the wording used in relation to environmental sustainability, the Council has declared a climate emergency, and that must influence the approach we take here. The point I would make, though, is that we are not the sole party to this development, and we have to work in a collaborative way and get agreement with Hampshire County Council and with Urban and Civic. But a lot of this is written, the aspirations, the principles are in the Manydown standard. But you know as well as I do that that the whole business of sustainability is fast moving, and so what we might agree here today it may be outmoded before we know it. Yeah, sure. Yeah, get you. Yeah. You make a good point about getting some clarity in relation to gypsy and traveller provision. This council has a responsibility in that respect, and that is a responsibility that sits in relation to Manydown. I'm speaking here, though, as the with my landowner hat on, but it is something that has been actively discussed in recent times, and perhaps I could invite the project director just to sort of give you any sort of update on that.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Yes, as he's just referenced, there's been some discussion about the how we evolve the proposed locations for gypsy and travellers. Just to remind members that this is an outline application that we're going with. So the outline application identifies that we will deliver 5 pitches. Section 106 will then set out a trigger point, and again we've been discussing with the local planning authority what that trigger point might look like, and again the concerns expressed corporately by the council in terms of the 5-year supply. So some of the discussion that is going on is to look to advance that provision of the gypsy and traveller site within 5 years, rather than looking at over the lifetime of the development, to ensure that we can provide sooner rather than later a particular site. There is no reason why we cannot accelerate that in terms of bringing that forward outside of the main development for Manydown. So we have begun a piece of work to look at what are the potential locations across Manydown, and again that will form part of a piece of consultation that will be undertaken in due course, both with MOC and through consultation with local communities, as what we've been doing, and the travelling community, to ensure that we identify where would be an appropriate location on Manydown to begin bringing forward a proposal. So that work is underway.
Thank you. Councillor James.
I'm afraid it's back to 3.2, the secondary school element. It says the applicant will reserve 12 acres of service land for a period of time. And I think we've already covered vague wording, but a period of time seems incredibly vague. That could be 5 minutes, it could be 100 years, I don't know. So I'd love to know what our definition of a period of time is. The next sort of question relating to that, and again it's a conversation to have with the county, I accept they're the education provider, is that we had Cranbourne School in special measures, and that means it had to go to an academy. No academy trust wanted it because it was a 5-form entry school. It was too small and wasn't viable or sustainable. And so it merged with Fort Hill, which was a 2-form entry school, which equally was unsustainable. That's what we were told, the reason it was closing, because there wasn't enough people there to make it sustainable. We're now saying that we're going to potentially, we'll keep a bit of land for this period of time for a 12-form entry school, but then we'll have land for a 5-form entry and then get rid of the rest of the land possibly afterwards. So I'd like the period of time tightened up in terms of wording, like once we've completed Manydown South, that might be a good sort of period of time to then review where we are, rather than saying period of time, because that means the county can cash in whenever they like. And also, I'm not quite sure why we're trying to open a 5 form entry school when we realise that 5 form entry secondary schools are really hard in terms of funding a wide enough curriculum to deliver the baccalaureate, etc. It seems to be the wrong ambition. You'd want to be opening a 10, 12 form entry school if you really want it to work. Schools in Basingstoke are traditionally quite small. So I'd understand I'd like some clarity around that and a bit more commitment from my friends in the county, let's not say friends, the people in the county about what they believe a period of time means.
Thank you for that question. We'll take that one away. I think the period of time is a negotiating point. As sitting here as the landowner, then we will want to put a time constraint, and that is part of the Section 106. We will not see that going on inevitably, as that land has value. And if I'm sat here as the landowner, we would want to obviously capitalise on that land value. However, yes, the issue still remains is in terms of secondary school, and I think the points have been well made today. And what's really important is how we, as the landowner, also engage with Hampshire County Council Education to consider and assess how we address the points that have been made here tonight and that were made at the meeting yesterday, and ensuring that we have a dialogue that looks to inform and where we can influence the thinking around education provision on Manydown as part of that dialogue.
Supplementary, whilst you're having those conversations, it was mooted before potentially where you're building a brand new area, whether an all-through school was more appropriate in terms of building the critical mass quickly so the school can open sooner because you've got kids going all the way through. Obviously later on you can dual site it in terms of putting primary school children at one of the other sites that are reserved, but an all-through school, it may be a terrible idea, I don't know. We've not got one in Basingstoke for me to look at and go, well, it works or it doesn't work, but it's a question mark whether in terms of getting the school open, and you've heard the passion from Winklebury about not having a secondary school nearby, whether an all-through school might actually speed the process of opening that school sooner so kids can access local education.
Thank you for that. And I've got Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a question for the team to take away and to work on, I think, with Hampshire. I think there is a massive trust issue here between the community in Winklebury and the surrounding area and what Hampshire might or might not do. And I think this could be a very serious Achilles heel of wanting to see this come forward. We don't want to see Manydown in any way stopped or delayed. But at the same time, if we are leaving open potential issues on education and they're not being closed off, then that raises concerns in the neighbouring community. If the community has not only seen its secondary school closed, bulldozed and sold for development, those children are then forced to go to Cranbourne and other schools around the town. There's no guarantee in the language of the heads of terms of the Section 106 agreement that the secondary school will be built, nor that those children from Winklebury will be able to access it, or how they will access it, either as a 5 form or 7 form or whatever form, or that the school would remain within the county council's control, or whether they would have to build it and give it over to an academy, and then what that would mean for the catchment area. And we have Everest as an example in Popley, just one example of where an academy took over a local school that the county council built, best part of £27 million they poured into Popley, and look at that community's struggle to maintain its access to that school. So there are really huge fundamental issues, I think, that the county do need to address to give the community confidence. The primary side is equal to that, because in the heads of terms, we're talking about creating at least a 2-form entry primary school as the initial first school. Now, if the county hasn't thought through or has an answer to the question, well, what happens to Winklebury infants and juniors in those circumstances, then again, that leaves it wide open. I get it, it's not for us to answer those questions, I get that, but unless the county can come up with a credible, genuine response to the people of Winklebury, the trust issue that they've had forced on them by county will continue to fester, and it's just not going to help the situation. I don't know how you square that circle, I really don't, but unless it can be addressed by county, I do see it as being quite a serious Achilles heel.
So this evening there's been a lot about education, and we're not the Education Authority. Hampshire County Council are the Education Authority. I do understand that the basis of some of the concerns that have been raised tonight by various speakers, it does seem to me then that it reinforces the point about inviting Hampshire to send a representative to this committee, so that they're given the opportunity of answering these points, and one would hope that in many instances they'll be able to allay the concerns that obviously exist. But it's sitting here as the portfolio holder responsible for Manydown, you would clearly understand that I'm not in a position to answer these questions.
John, I don't think anyone's asking you to, because you can't. I think that's not the problem. Is you're in the hot seat because you are here and you do represent the landowner, and this is 50-50. This is Hampshire's problem as much as it is ours. The issue here is they send somebody along to a committee, big scrutiny of this committee. It's a straw person put up for a debate round this table that may not answer the questions because they may not be allowed to. They may not be given the brief to. And yet those issues then still are alive because they don't address them. The last time we had them, they wouldn't talk in public. They would only talk behind closed doors. And when they did talk behind closed doors, it was full of facts and figures. It didn't actually address the questions that members across the council asked. I don't know how we do this with the county. I don't know how you can facilitate this without, in a sense, causing yourself more of a problem. This needs to be really carefully thought through, and maybe it's an issue that yourself with the leader needs to talk to the leader at county about in order that they understand the gravity of what we're dealing with here. I don't know how you address it, and I'm not, in a sense, saying expecting you to, but in a sense it's landed in you in the hot seat, I'm afraid, in the sense of you're the landowner.
Yes, but they're a public body, and I expect them to find a way of answering these sorts of questions. And so, even if it's not at this place, but all we can do is draw attention to some of the issues that have been raised here, and invite them to send somebody with enough status to be able to respond to them, or do so in another way that works for them.
Thank you. Councillor Gaskell.
Sorry, a general comment from the public about carbon neutral properties. As chairman of CEP, we discussed that in CEP. Councillor Mahaffey was very vocal about it, and we discussed potentially carbon positive properties. So it's probably not part of this meeting because we expect an update in one of the future CEP meetings. So we look forward to that. The other thing was we mentioned the pedestrian bridge. I assume it's the one north of Thornycroft roundabout. One of the sites suggested for the ice rink was adjacent to that. Maybe we could put a bridge in which would alleviate access issues there if that was considered as a suitable site for ice rink or anything else. So that was just a general comment.
I think we're done with questions. Is there anything anybody wants to say in debate? No? Good, thank you. Right, I've got quite a few notes. Noted the transport assessment update progress, the situation with the 106 agreement, particularly for contribution to funding the highways, and the fact that work is starting on the biodiversity corridor very, very soon. So recommended that Manydown overview notes the progress made on the Manydown project, and also reviews the comments and the content of this report for consideration by the Manydown Executive Committee. And for consideration, I've got transport link and the main issue that's been discussed tonight, which is school issues. So inviting the someone from Hampshire County Council Education. Is everybody happy with that? Good, thank you. So we will move on to next item, which is Manydown North Delivery Vehicle and Procurement. Introduction from Councillor Isaac.
Thank you, Chairman. As I said earlier, this is my other priority, the administration's other priorities to end the interminable negotiations on the finer details of the contract with our private sector partner, Urban and Civic and Wellcome Trust. I don't wish by saying that to understate the importance of getting these highly complex legal agreements and financial agreements absolutely right, because these are going to regulate a relationship for 15 years or so, and we've got to make sure that all the possible implications and issues that may arise are as far as possible dealt with in terms of the contract. The next stage will be a final suite of documents and final technical reports produced by our advisors, and those will confirm that the deal is legally compliant and represents value for money. And I think the target remains for us to make a contract award, sign the agreements within the next few weeks. Is that I'm correct in that in stating that, am I, Andrew?
Yes, correct, Councillor Isaac. That is the target in terms of achieving a satisfactory completion of the legal agreements.
And I just draw the committee's notice to the fact that we've had further legal advice that we need to approve further approvals that are required to enable the two councils to enter into written resolutions of the Manydown Garden Communities LLP and as a member of DevCo, and so that's explained here, and it also is necessary to give the proper legal approvals to enable officers to sign on behalf of the two councils in due course, and a report covering all those issues is going to Cabinet on the 10th of March. Correct?
Next week, 11th of February.
Is it? Oh, 11th of February. Right, I do apologise. Oh, right, well, things are moving more quickly than I'm used to. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. Andrew.
I mean, Councillor Isaac said the majority of, in terms of the current position, say there is a daily dialogue between the lawyers, ourselves, and Urban and Civic in terms of just dealing with any final drafting points. There will be scheduled a briefing of senior officers week commencing 24th of February to go through the final contracts, and then a completion date being set, then a full day being set aside to transact the documents in terms of engrossing and signing when we will complete. So that landing path, if you like, to the completion is now being clearly set out, which is really good news. And positive in terms of getting to a point so we can enter March with a position to be able to go forward with Urban and Civic as our and Wellcome Trust as our joint venture partner.
Thank you for that. We have public speaking again. Sorry? No public speaking again. Councillor Tilbury, do you wish to speak again? No. In that case, questions to officers? No questions to officers. Debate? No debate? Good, we're going to go on. Right, I think that's really about it. I'm sure we will all take on everything that's been said, and the officers will take on board everything that's come up tonight. So, meeting. Oh, Councillor Harvey.
Just quickly, not to lose what you said earlier, if we aren't doing all the education stuff as chair, do you want to take away, if you don't mind, and pass it on to scrutiny? If that was irrelevant, you've got the power to do that as the chair. If it's not all going to come here, leave that in your hands as to how you deal with it.
Okay, yeah, certainly I can do that. Sorry? Sorry, I've just been told I've not done the work programme, so I think the most important thing is consultation with the Education Authority. Has anybody else anything else they want to put on the work programme? Councillor Harvey, would you like this committee to formally recommend this to go to scrutiny, and what would you like? How would you like that worded?
The only thing I'm picking up is that you mentioned that it may not already be relevant to this committee. I'm happy with it to stay here because that's the debate that it's got, and members around this table have got experience to bring to bear, and members of the public are coming and talking on it. If you're happy with that, if you're not happy with that as the chair and you think other things need to be picked up by other committees, all I'm saying is I just don't want it lost. So maybe this is something we can pick up offline and not necessarily have to agree. I'm happy to do it informally if you're happy with that. There's no need to be heavy-handed with it.
Yeah, I'm happy. We can have a conversation about it and take it from there. Is everybody happy with that?
And Chair, you've got the meeting down as the 17th of June as the next meeting. Am I correct on that?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. And meeting finished at 7:45. Thank you.